You're very welcome back. Now, tonight, a new Virgin Media documentary takes an in-depth look at the first medically supervised drug injection centre at Merchants Quay in Dublin.
We're going to take a quick look.
Ireland is in the midst of a drug epidemic. Between 300 and 400 people per year die from drug overdoses.
We have the highest drug-related deaths in Europe.
So easy anyway to be unhygienic and get diseases and that. I've used water out of toilet cisterns, I've used water out of a puddle.
A new and radical approach has been undertaken. In 2017, steps were put in place for Ireland's first medically supervised injection facility.
Obviously, there are going to be people worried. Why should we give people that use drugs a place where they can go and use drugs? So what's the alternative? Just let them use behind your block of flats?
Joining us now is CEO of Merchants Quay Ireland, Eddie Mullins, coordinator of ISCA, Andy O'Hara, and Gail Cullen-Doyle, chairperson of the Oliver Bond Residents Group. You're all very welcome. Thank you so much for coming in. Because this documentary is going on tonight at 9 p.m. and it is so interesting. So, Eddie, can we talk about Ireland's first drug injection centre? It opened in December. Could you tell us, for our viewers, what exactly happens there? What services are provided?
Yeah, so the Supervised Injection Centre opened in December, as you say, Muireann, and I suppose it's an addition to the services that we already provided in Merchants Quay on Riverbank. So at Riverbank we have primary health care, we have harm reduction, we have mental health teams, and we have an open access centre for people who are generally in very difficult circumstances who visit the centre on a daily basis. So the addition of the supervised injection facility was a natural addition to the services that were already there. And the concept came from government policy. It was in the last National Drug Strategy, and it was to open a supervised injection facility, which is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a facility where people who inject drugs can come in and do so under the supervision of a medical team. And I think the real opportunity there is that this is a group of people who are generally probably the most marginalised in our society. And previously, if you injected drugs, you did so in a very undignified and unsafe situation, usually in very innocuous parts of the city. So this facility now provides that opportunity for people.
Are there injection centres like this in other countries, and what impact have they had?
Yeah, there are. There are about, I think, between 40 and 50 across the world. And what they have done is they've allowed service providers to get to work with a very hard-to-reach group of people.
What sort of countries do we know?
Well, I know there's one. We opened ours in December, and Scotland opened one in January. There's one in Melbourne, there's one in Toronto, there's one in Lisbon, Madrid, Barcelona. Yeah, okay. So it's right across the world.
It certainly is. So, Andy, you join us from ISCA. So this is it's the National Advocacy Service for people who use drugs in Ireland, which one would think is a very underrepresented group, people who aren't actually engaged in society. How do you view the opening of this injection centre?
Well, look, it's a critical part of the infrastructure that says to people your life has value and your life matters. I mean, we'll be working with an awful lot of people who wake up this morning and for the first few seconds, people tell us the first few seconds are great because they forget that they're a person who uses drugs, and then the addiction kicks in, and then they start to think about all the things they're going to have to go through that day to acquire some money to beg, maybe involved in sex work. And it's a day of violence, abuse and trauma for people who have grown up experiencing massive amounts of trauma, massive amounts of abuse. So they're taking drugs to cope with undiagnosed trauma, they're taking drugs to self-medicate. And then because of the journey they have to go through on a daily basis, they're often they're very, very re-traumatised, and a lot of the time they're pushed into extremely risky situations where they risk losing their life on a daily basis, which is why we have some of the highest drug-related deaths in Europe. And it's important to remember a lot of these deaths are preventable. And for the safe and injecting facility, what it does is it gives people a chance to breathe. It gives people a chance to go somewhere and use safely. Nobody wants to be using up a lane with their underwear down around their ankles, with people abusing them, shouting at them, risking their lives. And I would urge people at home just to remember these are daughters, their sons, their mothers, their fathers. And I suppose if we knew some of our children through no fault of their own and because of horrific abuse and trauma were now taking drugs, and because of that they were in a cycle of emergency accommodation, prisons, living on the streets, sex work, that what they had to do on a daily basis to get through that was to take drugs. Would we not say, look, we'll just give you a place where you can be safe, we can look after you, and we can keep you alive, because that's what this place does. It keeps people alive and it gives them dignity and respect.
Gail, you are a resident in the area, in Dublin 8 as well. You feel opening this centre, though, in that area, Dublin, is a step in the wrong direction?
Yeah, definitely. Because if I can just take you back a bit to the 80s and the 90s when the heroin was really bad, Merchants Quay actually opened the needle exchange, and I would have been a student in the school that's at the back of Merchants Quay. And now, although it was set up to tackle the HIV spread and to stop the sharing of the needles, it worked for that particular thing, but it didn't work for the community. So the stuff that we witnessed with needles and children play doctors with needles and having to go to hospital to get checked to see whether they had caught anything from the needle. So our fear would be that what we witnessed as kids growing up, it was very, very traumatic. Like, I'm speaking about it now in my therapy, and nobody speaks about community trauma. So it's really, really, like, I'm actually getting emotional now because it's really, really traumatic for our community. And I do understand that it's needed, but Dublin 8 has had its fair share of stuff being thrown in. And an injecting centre is not what it's what we need, but it's not what we need in our area. And then our local principal, who just left the school, Eilish Marr, she fought tooth and nail for this not to go in. But what we're seeing now, while waiting on the government to deliver this programme, what we're seeing now is that needle use is not very high in our community. It's crack and cocaine is being smoked. So although the injecting centre will help the people on needles, it's not going to help the people that smoke and crack. So our children is going to be witnessing crack and cocaine being smoked. So consumption rooms need to be open, not injecting centres, and not in Dublin 8, all over Ireland.
So what do you think? Because obviously you were saying there's kids growing up here and they're seeing an awful lot of drug use. But you've also said we need these injections. So where do you think it should go?
They definitely should be in a hospital setting.
Okay.
Because addiction now is going down the route that it's a health-led approach. So if any of us get a disease tomorrow, we'll be referred to a hospital. So why would you not refer the person that's on drugs?
Okay.
Singling them out.
You wanted to come in there as well?
Yeah, no, look, I think Gail is right. First of all, we need consumption rooms and we need also drop-ins for people, because again, we have to understand drugs are here. It's how do we mitigate the harms and how to provide spaces that are community-based, but also for people who use drugs and families. But also, Gail is correct that what happens is a lot of the people we'll work with are from communities like the South Inner City, and there's a lack of investment. Look, what we need to do is have preventative measures that are working for communities, people who use drugs and families. So, for a community like the South West Indies, they need investment in good accommodation, in educational attainment, in employment opportunities. They work for people who use drugs before they enter into this, and then on the flip side. So a lot of the stuff that Gail would say we'd actually agree with from a community. What we need is investment in communities, and some communities feel like they're left behind, and then when stuff is foisted on them, it can be a challenge.
But they are, because I suppose when you're thinking they're going, you hear Philly McMahon speak so eloquently about this, how he grew up and the trauma in his area. And we're noticing that cocaine use in Ireland, in very posh areas of Ireland, is through the roof. We were speaking to doctors here, neurosurgeons, who were saying that's something that they're dealing with all of the time, brain bleeds because of cocaine use. But it's treated differently, Eddie, isn't it? Like, it is treated differently depending on where in the...
No question about it. I mean, the reality is 90% of the drugs trade is taken up by middle-class people, right? So that the people who use our service are at the rock bottom.
Yeah.
Okay? They're not the target market for the drugs industry, because they are people who don't have significant means. It's people with means who can buy their cocaine at the weekend and get up and go to work on Monday.
We're talking about the injection centre here.
Yeah, sorry.
Right? I think one of Gail's issues with this is that this injection centre has been set up on the back of a school.
Sure.
So if you're talking about kids in an area that they're having to play outside the school and witness this, what was the thinking that was the right place to set up this centre?
To be honest, Tommy, there's never going to be a right place. It's always going to be
but beside a school.
Well, it was an addition to services that were available within Merchants Quay for the last 40 years, and it was set up 40 years ago to respond to the needs of the community at the time, and it has evolved with the evolution of the drugs industry. Merchants Quay has improved and increased services to keep a pace with the needs that are out there. I mean, we talked about the idea of a consumption room, and absolutely, you know, the trend is in that direction. But we've had 400 people use the facility since it opened in December. We've had almost 2,000 visits. We've had 24 non-fatal overdoses that we were able to deal with in the centre during that period. Now, before the facility opened, the likelihood is those overdoses would have occurred in the community. An ambulance would have been called, the person would have been taken to the emergency department, and it would have been very stressful for a significant number of people. We're now able to deal with that in the centre, deal with it effectively, safely, with people who are very vulnerable. So I can understand communities' reluctance. Of course, it's a very challenging experience for people in the communities, and we've worked very closely with the local community to try and alleviate concerns and to deal with issues as they arise. We've doubled our outreach team to go out into the community and pick up needles as they find them, and we've seen a 25%.
Oh yeah, definitely since Eddie came along, but before Eddie came along there was barely any communication or interaction from Merchants Quay.
So there has been a change?
There has been a change, yeah. There is good work going on, but at the same time it's not fair in our community that this is what we're being given, and yet we've a lack of facilities, a lack of sporting facilities for positive stuff for our young people to engage in. Like going back to when the heroin...
But they're seeing these sort of behaviours, I suppose,
Oh, yeah, definitely. And it's like the norm for them, and it shouldn't be the norm for them, you know. They should be able to play safely.
Yeah.
If you can just go back to, like, the heroin epidemic, if you want to call it, back then, I'll give credit where it's due. The government did act, and a lot of stuff was put in place. There was facilities and there was regenerations to try distract other people from coming on board and using. But that was 35 years ago. And since then, they've pulled funding on organisations. They've done away with community centres. They've done away with pitches. So 35 years on, we don't have anything for our young people
and
whatsoever.
Just when that clip started, it says we are in a drug epidemic. And it doesn't look like it's getting any better.
Look, drugs, we have to accept the current reality. Like, since the 80s when heroin first hit, we have more drugs, they're more potent, they're in every parish across the community. But also for places like Oliver Bond, I'm from a working class area myself, the problems are accentuated and they're still there. We have a never-ending supply of people who are willing to take drugs because of trauma, and a never-ending supply of people who are willing to sell drugs because of an economic opportunity. If we can resolve those and invest in this stuff like this won't be seen as a barrier to people. Like, there's almost we have to stop. We're almost saying, well, let's stop having to make the choice.
Yeah.
Let's stop having to make the choice whether we can have a life-saving facility or safety in the community. Yeah. Let's have both. Because if you look at the facility, what it does is save lives. We do an awful lot of outreach around the area. We work with the community, and we'll see a decrease in some of the activity or some of the where people were previously injecting, they're now injecting. So a lot of the time, some of this stuff can actually alleviate some of the fears, but an awful lot of people injecting, still an awful lot of people smoking. Let's give people dignity and respect, but let's also invest in communities and have a whole community response approach.
And it's interesting that you did just mention the people who are selling these drugs for and making a huge profit by destroying the country, let's be honest about it. Eddie Mullen, CEO of Merchants Quay Ireland, Andy O'Hara, Coordinator with Uisce, and Gail Cullen-Doyle, Chair of the Oliver Bond Flats Residents Committee. Thank you all so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.